Hello, everybody. I think we are live. I see a lot of people here. So, yeah, we are live. Great. Um, Awesome. I'm hoping everybody's having a good time at Unicon, and we've had a series of fun sessions so far and a lot of learning. And this one's going to be very interesting as well. I'm very excited to talk to Greg, and Jennifer should be joining us soon. And yeah, there she is. And I'm really excited to talk to both of them. And we are going to be talking about a very interesting thing today, right? And it's about multicultural marketing and making sure how you understand your diverse audiences and build a brand keeping that in mind. And since I have both of them here now, and a lot of you folks as well, I think we can go ahead and get started. I know that we're doing this virtually. Everybody is in different parts of the world. If you guys can drop your location, where you're joining from, where you're listening from, that would be awesome. I'll start off. I am in Vancouver, Canada, right now. It's beautiful. The weather's great. Um, I have to prep myself for the winter though, but so far so good. Yeah, looking forward to know where everybody else is joining in from. All right, Greg, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. It's amazing that you could make out time, and we've had a chat about this before, and I wanted to get you both on this panel so we could share a lot more learnings with everybody else here. Um, and I'll just let me go ahead and give a short background about both of these amazing individuals so that everybody knows who they're listening to. So Jennifer Quigely-Jones is the CEO and founder of Digital Voices. It's an agency that drives growth for brands through the power of influence. And prior to Digital Voices, Jennifer worked at YouTube as a strategic partner manager, helping creators to grow on the platform. And Gregory Curtis Jr., he's the CEO of Arecibo, and multicultural marketing expert. He's a subject matter expert on multicultural marketing with over 15 years of experience in a variety of different aspects of sales and marketing, but particularly an expert on diversity and multicultural marketing. And we're going to get to learn a lot from both of these guys, and I hope everybody is geared and ready to listen.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
us.
Awesome. Cool. So let's just set some context, right? There was a Nielsen report that was published a few years ago, and it's from a few years ago. That's the catch. But, it still said that multicultural millennials who are active on their mobile devices spend over $65 billion a year in the US alone and drive more than $1 trillion in influence in the whole D2C consumer packaged goods sort of segment, right? And let's settle that data in for a bit. And this report was like maybe 5 years ago. $1 trillion in consumer spends online was influenced by millennials from multicultural backgrounds, right? So can we say that multicultural marketing is really table stakes today in today's date? And I mean, every brand needs to just understand that it's not a strategy. It is something you are expected to do.
Who wants to start
Yeah,
on that one? I'm very happy to.
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead, Jennifer.
um, I think brands who aren't engaging with multicultural marketing and also like speaking the language of their consumers are cutting off a whole customer base. So it's not just like it's the right thing to do, it's also the right thing financially for brands to do. And I'm still surprised that there are some amazing brands that don't necessarily have like their customer journeys translated or their apps in multiple languages, or I think there's so much still to be done, and this feels like it should be really obvious because there's a financial clear win, but actually in reality it still doesn't happen because brands imagine their customer is a specific target customer and they forget who that customer could be and the diverse different customer groups that could buy their products.
I love everything that you just said, Jennifer, and I am so excited to be on this panel with you. I'm very impressed with your background and your expertise, and I saw some of the content that you have placed on the interwebs, and fantastic efforts. And thank you again, Pratik. That being said, I love the report that you pulled from Nielsen. I'm very familiar with that report. And I would actually like to just highlight that while millennials are doing that, we also need to look at Gen Z. They're the most multicultural, multifaceted, and gender expansive generation we've yet to see. And just recently, the 4A's just dropped an article doing a review of what took place in 2022. In 2020 during Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, Civil Unrest, etc. And within the advertising, communication, and perspective Fortune 500 organizations, from C-level executive all the way down to AVP, meaning associate vice president level, 73% of the executives were white. And when you look at where we're currently at, they just did the same study in 2022. It's now 90% white. And so the reason why I'm talking about the leadership in the face of that, it's super important to have the research, the diligency behind being effective, being collaborative, having the proper content, to be forward thinking. And when I say this, I love when Jennifer said, they have one audience in mind, and they kind of say, this is the general marketing approach we're going to take. When I hear general marketing, I hear alt-white. I hear like white family, white single man, white single woman. I also think very cis heterosexual. I don't hear inclusivity. I don't see me. I'm a mixed race, very tall queer person. And so I really want brands, and I'm inviting brands to understand, if you want your brand to survive 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it is going to be imperative that you understand that multicultural is not just about race. It's not just about gender. It's about communities. It's about behaviors and tribes and shared interests and values. And you have got to understand even the language in that. And I'm just inviting them to be more collaborative.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's intense, right? And and I think it reflects the passion, right? And Jennifer, if you guys missed it, Jennifer just said that she has goosebumps. I mean, because that's the intensity of this matter, especially if you are that consumer, right? And if you feel left out and you don't feel included, think about what that's going to do to your brand, right? And just one shout out, everybody who's listening and has connected, feel free to write your questions into the Q&A section. I'm keeping an eye on that. Of course, there's a bunch of things that we are going to discuss, but I want to make sure that nobody has to wait till the end for the Q&A. We can keep the questions coming. Cool. So, Greg, Jennifer, can we talk about one example that each one of you share about some brand or some campaign that you like a lot because it's done a good job at taking care of this multicultural aspect? And Greg, maybe we can start with you this time.
Yeah, actually, I have two examples. One, I love Procter& Gamble. Procter& Gamble just recently was in the south of France when everyone was brainstorming and ideating around what's next. They said, hey, we're going to widen the image. We're going to widen the screen, meaning we're going to have able bodies, non-able bodies, so people who may have a disability. We're going to have women. We're going to have women of different races and ethnicities and cultures. We're going to have language that's nuanced. We're going to have queer identities. We're going to widen the screen. And just taking that step alone is in the right direction because you're creating a space for more inclusivity. In addition to that, one of my favorite agencies is Edelman. I have to give them a round of applause for the way they handle Unilever, that legacy client being Dove. They specifically are around the hair care products for Dove. And in 2021, there was a political bill advocating for Black and brown people's hair. And Dove understood the significance of that. And they also understood how it would impact their bottom line by being and advocating for the interest of hair care product for this particular demographic and audience. And by doing that, the campaigns were beautiful. They were inclusive. They weren't stereotyping. They weren't pushy, or they didn't feel unauthentic. They resonated well, and that's the importance of like resonating well. And I think that because it came from a very honest place, and they were a part of it. They put their dollars behind the bill to ensure it passed. The campaign nationally was a success.
That's
I
amazing.
love that campaign, the Crown Act campaign. What I think was so clever about it, actually, about both the examples you mentioned, like P&G specifically tries to work with like diverse owned businesses, which is phenomenal, and like Black filmmakers, Black creative agencies, like they want to really make sure that their money is also, the marketing spend they spend is also helping underrepresented groups succeed. And the thing I loved about the Dove piece as well is that they really pushed through to a petition. It wasn't just, hey, look how inclusive our ad campaigns are. It was like, here's a political action you can take that is very clear. I did a post about it on LinkedIn. It's actually, I think, the most viral thing I've ever done on LinkedIn was posting about the Dove professional hair care. Yeah.
No, it was fabulous. And the reason why I like it specifically around the petition is that what's currently happening right now in the US, with like Senator Rick Scott, with the GOP, is that they're pushing towards like affirmative action with education, but now they're doing it from a workspace perspective about like who you hire through DEI efforts. And that's going to impact corporations and CPGs and agencies in so many ways when it comes to having cultural, social, and historical context of your consumer, because there will be marginalized identities left out.
Completely agree.
We talked about a couple of these big brands, right? Procter and Gamble, Unilever, the largest brands in this space that you could imagine, right? How do you do this if you're a small brand? Let's say you are a direct to commerce small brand, you want to be, sensitive, you want to be inclusive, you know that your audience is diverse. And how do you handle this if you don't have large budgets to work with agencies or hire large consumer research groups?
So a slightly smaller brand that we did a campaign that I am probably the most proud of any campaign we've ever done with was Hinge. And Hinge did not so frequently asked questions. So they asked us to source creators from like a lot of different sexual and racial and gender identities, and then have them talk about not so frequently asked like LGBT plus questions you might not have heard responses to. And then they took that content, and on top of it being organic social content, they put it on the subway in New York, they put it on billboards, they put it, there's a billboard in Brooklyn, like a mural painted. They put it on the tube in London. And there weren't actually that many creators in that campaign. Since then, they've done a second iteration to expand it, but it looked effortlessly diverse. It won so much PR. It took, and the thing that I thought was genius about it, and that if I were a small brand, don't go bigger, go deeper. So what they did was they got these people to share their not so frequently asked LGBT plus questions. So like, I'm demisexual. When do I bring up that I need to be emotionally connected before we get sexual? Or like, if I'm a femme presenting lesbian, how do I make it clear I'm flirting, not just complimenting you? And it took like that really deep relationship with the creators, and the fact that like the substance was at the heart of the campaign made those communities feel seen. And the number of messages we got were like, oh my God, people were posting it to their Instagram, like finally an advert that I feel reflects me because I never get this experience. And it's not because the campaign was a huge budget. Like, yes, they had out of home involved, but they went for fewer creators who were from very different communities. And then they made the substance of the campaign much deeper. And that's the type of conversation you need to have with like underrepresented audiences and underrepresented consumers, because you need them to feel like they truly are understood by your brand. So it's not about huge budgets. It's about the quality of the conversation you're having through your marketing.
Love that. It's literally a conversation. And in regards to budgets, I invite small to medium-sized businesses to have conversations with Jennifer or myself. But I'll say this. There are plenty of platforms where if you have target audiences that you would want to source micro or nano or mid-size influencers like Octopus Skippers, for example. It's a gifting platform that you can go on. You can actually literally have your products placed on there, and you can cipher through and say, hey, there's three Asian queer femmes, and then you get to look at their Instagram and their TikToks and say, hey, does this work for my brand? Is this relevant? Let's look at the conversation that they're having with their community. Does this work for my brand? Do I feel comfortable aligning with, my brand with this community? And I'll say this, I worked as a consultant with Fashion Fair Cosmetics, and it's a legacy, it's the first Black cosmetic line ever in the world, founded by the Johnson family of Ebony and Jet Magazine, but now it's owned by two Black American women, Desiree Rogers and Sharon Mabey McKissick. Super grateful for the opportunity. Towards Pride Month, they wanted to have an authentic conversation with cis to cis. And so what that means is like cis woman, but then like cis, like SIS. So like women assigned at birth female, and then their trans sisters. And we had Hope Giselle, who's a political commentator on MSNBC, CNN, etc., with her girlfriend, T.S. Madison, who's featured on Beyonce's Renaissance album. And they're literally, they're playing with the makeup, they're having fun, they're talking. And then following that IG Live, Hope Giselle did an unveiling of her makeup, where she took off the makeup and said it is because of Fashion Fair and it is because of Black women that she is a Black trans woman, feels seen, feels understood, feels respected, and it is the beauty of Black women that she will always uphold and aspire to. And the comments of cis women supporting this trans woman were remarkable. The CEO had a dinner with her in DC just because of like how it resonated with the audience.
That's phenomenal, but it's also like the bravery. So if you're a smaller brand and you don't have huge budgets, you need to be brave enough to have these conversations, right? Like, because otherwise your messaging is forgettable. So it's like that connection, that conversation. I love it. I'm sorry. Just so happy.
Yeah, and I think the core of that is really what both of you mentioned, right? Like as a brand, you need to really be honest in understanding your target audience and really want to be in their shoes and understand what's going on in their lives. And that's the only way you're going to have that authentic connection that's going to come back to you through that audience as well, because they'll be able to relate to you a lot better. Um, and I mean, Harsh has asked a question here. I'm not sure if you folks would have an answer for this, but we can definitely look into it. And, the same challenge happens in India in the sense that India itself is a very diverse country. Every region has its own kinks and nuances, and, people buy different things and people have different interests and so on. And I think his question is around whether any such Indian brand has done that. And I'm sure there are many that have done it. And have you folks come across any? Have you worked with any brands in India, Jennifer?
There are a couple of examples I've seen that I think were really good. We haven't. We're about to launch, I think, our first Indian campaign, hopefully very soon. But I love the P&G period education campaign, and that was all about like how many girls in India are missing school because of period poverty. Because also it's like this lack of education around women's issues, or it's often the parents don't understand as well. So in the ad campaign, it was like a daughter educating her pet. It was like a child's friend came around, like, why isn't my friend in school? And then educate the parent, which was really interesting because I think it looked at diversity in terms of like cross-generational, which I think is really interesting, like accepting where knowledge might be lacking. And then there was another really cool Indian campaign. I can't remember, is it Cadbury? They created a celebrity in AI and he promoted a lot of different small businesses. And that, I think, won a Cannes Lion or was shortlisted. It was really phenomenal because it gave the access of this big brand name Bollywood star to, it was Cadbury, brilliant, to small businesses. And I thought that was, again, really clever because it's like thinking, what will my audience need? What do they want? And what your audience probably needs if you're if you want to support small businesses is support from a big celebrity name and ads.
Yeah, and I think Kailash here also has shared in the chat that Coca-Cola runs this whole music-based, series called Coke Studio, which has a very Indian version to it also, that does really well. Spotify had done a campaign some time back where they did this campaign where it's called there's a playlist for that campaign. So it is very geo-targeted because different songs, if even the same song has different meanings, uh, irrespective of where you are from. So they launched this campaign that was called like, whatever, there's a playlist for that. So if you're sitting in traffic, if you are cultural nuances that happen in India, right? If it's a hot day, there's a playlist for that. Are you stuck in traffic? There's a playlist for that.
I love that.
Like you have there is cultural nuances where there is very little personal boundary in India, right? Like there's so many people, right? So there is always somebody in your face, in your house. Your neighbors are not really just your neighbors. They know a lot about you, right? So there's a playlist for that. So that's what Spotify did, and it was fun campaign as well.
Oh, I love that. The only thing that I had close proximity to is I was working with an agency that worked with Mariah Angelique, and she belonged to a campaign with Coca-Cola called A Kind of Magic, and it was all encompassing. They literally had everyone from just about anywhere in the world that was an up and coming musician in this commercial. She was one amongst the many. It was like 50 artists, a few from India, South Asia, China, Japan. I mean, it was in certain West African sounds. It was a lot going on. It was a beautiful commercial though. It was about 3 minutes long. A kind of magic by Coca Cola. I think they do a better job, in my opinion, than Pepsi. So yeah.
Awesome.
Love the
There's
tea.
another question. There's another question here, and we have an entire session tomorrow about AI and influencer marketing. But there's one question here by Abhigyan, which is, what are your thoughts on virtual influencers diversity? Like, are virtual influencers, do they have an identity, right? And a lot of people
Yeah.
follow a lot of virtual influencers. Is
Yeah.
that also something to be considered?
Greg, I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you do too.
No, I would love to hear your
Yeah.
POV on virtual.
So I think using virtual influencers, especially diverse one, often comes from a good place for brands. Like Levi used a lot of virtual influencers on their site so that you could see how different styles fit on you. So the intention was good. In reality, virtual influencers, you're putting profits in the hand of the studios that make them. You're not putting profits in the hands of the underrepresented people and creators who are often suffering from pay gaps anyway, who are struggling to make full-time money as a content creator. And often, I'm sure there are some very beautiful, like, virtual influencers that are very representative in terms of race, but the studios are owned by straight white men, so just stop. Like, just don't. Like, if I were a brand, you could build at the beginning of a campaign around it, but then you would get, there are so many models who don't get work, who look not separate from like the norm of beauty. There are so many agencies desperate to work with brands and influencers desperate to work with brands that come from underrepresented groups, and instead you're going to pay someone who's good at graphic design, like runs a design studio. Like, that to me is like a travesty and should not happen. I get really annoyed about that.
I love you, Jennifer. One of my girlfriends, her name is Sharon Eubanks. She's a Black American young lady from Atlanta, Georgia. She went to Stern, but then she went to the Chicago Portfolio School of Design. She can actually do design. She hates the concept of virtual influencers, specifically when you just look at the data. And I said I was absolutely going to use this as an example because I advocate for women, period. Some of my best leaders and mentors have been women. And with that being said, if we look, for example, at like a woman like Sharon, Black women right now in the US represent the most educated demographic. They also represent the most demographic in regards to highest debt of student loan. They represent 14%, they're 14% of what it means to be a woman in the USA, yet they represent 47% of entrepreneurship in the USA. And it's because they're not getting hired, in these corporations. And so she actually started like consulting and freelancing work in the virtual realm of influencer. So Jennifer, that's why the fact you came out the gate swinging in that direction, I'm like, I have to send this to Sharon.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how something that's created as a fake ideal that is not a real person, where they're like inserting opinions. Like, I mean, if you've seen like little Michaela, they're like, oh, maybe she'll have a Republican friend. I'm like, what? Why? Like, what? Virtual influencers cannot try your products, they cannot buy your products, they cannot truly advocate for your products, their engagement rates are lower, and then you're taking money out of the creator economy that loops into paying for other entrepreneurs and hiring more people. Like, these are small businesses. Choose to support influencers as small businesses and help them grow. Like, that's what we should be doing.
And also, I think that it will give your brand more synergy, working with content creators that are actually lived people. People pay money to see them at panels and conversation pieces, or just to meet up them. If it's a product at Sephora, at Ulta, maybe it's at Target because they have an accessory and they're known for their accessories, or maybe they're disabled and they get their glasses from lens crafters. Collaborating with real people, you'll get real impact.
We just have a couple more minutes, so we'll take this one last question that's in the chat. In an era of cultural sensitivity, how do you approach selecting influencers to ensure authentic representation of different cultures and communities? So how do you find the right influencers while keeping all of this in mind, and what are some pitfalls to avoid in the process?
I think it's super important for brands to find influencers that are authentic. Not all influencers are created equal. And what I mean by that, for example, I would consider the Kardashian family a family of influence. And I would also consider like a FUPA that took place with Pepsi. The Kendall Jenner situation where she was in the middle of a protest, like emulating what actually took place during civil unrest, with like an actual woman who's of color handing it was, the whole thing was just tone deaf and completely wrong. And so what I'm trying to say is this: finding influencers, whether they be micro or macro or nano or mid-size, make sure their voice resonates with you, the community that you're attempting to serve. Make sure that the community feels that it's aligned with them. Believe me, you can see influencers when they go to product push, they like, I can never see you with that. Why did you do that? And they will actually be impacted by that. I think that Tabitha Brown, for example, she's an excellent influencer who became famous for being a vegan. She collaborated with McCormick. That made sense. She wore funky colors and accessories. Collaborated with Target. That makes sense. There's a Loke is a queer non-binary activist, graduated from Stanford, wrote a book about being non-binary as a child, and they collaborated. They collaborated recently with an accessory line that's gender neutral for children. That makes sense. So I think that, like, for your organization, find influencers where it aligns.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think
Jennifer?
we use a lot of data tools to identify influencers. So we identify by who their audience is, but after that, that's very basic demographics, like US, age, gender. They don't have demographics on racial audience. Like no one's built that yet, or disability or sexual identity. So once you get that list of the demographic match, you then have to go through manually the whole of someone's past to understand those stories that Gregory shared. And that's the stage we would recommend those people to brands. But I would say most importantly, and this is if you do have a budget for running influence campaigns, the diversity piece that Gregory spoke about at the beginning is the crucial part. Like, because if you don't have a diverse range of opinions or thoughts or genders or any communities in the room in an ad agency, you cannot design diverse campaigns. So I would we never ever get asked this. Like, I think Unilever did one survey that asked if the company was female owned, queer owned, like BIPOC owned. So I filled that in, but apart from that, no one's ever asked, and no one's really looked at our staff. But like, if you are at an influencer pitch and people show a photo of their team and it is all white, like all white people, do not think maybe that influencer agency is capable of running a campaign for Black History Month. Maybe stop and think and be like, right, who is the diversity in the room shaping the opinions and the creative and the influencer selection? Who is the person coming up with the campaign that an influencer will run, the creative that they'll post? Because if it's not someone from that community or tangential to that community even involved, then you're not going to get a campaign that resonates. If you are in-house and you cannot afford to hire lots of people and you're like, I know I want to do this, I have great intentions, pay a focus group. Like, it's small budgets. Pay like $15.
It's research and being diligent.
Yeah. Hire a consultant for a couple of days. Like, honestly, it will pay dividends because you'll come up with a campaign that is authentic and is actually going to resonate with that audience. Because otherwise, they will know if you're being tokenistic and they will know if you're trying to just sell to them. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Gregory. I would love to just keep going because I think there's so much to talk about this topic.
Right.
And, it looks like from the chat as well, everybody has enjoyed this session. If both of you want to drop your favorite social handles here, maybe some of these folks can follow you, learn more from you, connect with you.
Absolutely. So my social handles are my full name, Gregory Curtis Jr. on everything, my .com, my Instagram, LinkedIn, all of the things.
Awesome. Thank you again.
This was honestly like highlight of my week and it's the end of a Friday.
Awesome. Thank you so much for saying that, Jennifer. It means a lot. And thank you so much, both of you, for taking out time, and everybody who was listening to this conversation. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions. I hope you have a good Friday and an amazing weekend. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Be
Have a
well.
great rest of the event. Bye.
Bye-bye.